Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Expose the Weakest Links in Your Data Center Migration Process. In this session, we'll show you step-by-step how to identify the weakest links in your data center migration process and maximize your investment in your automation tools so you can get there faster without downtime. My name is Marguerite McGrail, and I'm the marketing specialist here at TDS. We'll be recording today's presentation, so you'll get the link in your follow-up email afterwards. Our presenters today are Steve Gunderson and Pete Steer. Steve is the Vice President of Direct Sales for TDS. Steve creates solutions for complex migration initiatives for Fortune 500 companies across the healthcare, financial services, and manufacturing industries, as well as state and federal government. Our other presenter today is Pete Steer, our global trainer here at TDS. Pete has traveled the world training expert migration practitioners in transition manager implementation. He's developed our training program for both internal onboarding and TDS partner enablement. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during our presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom chat window. I'll bring them up at the end of our demonstration for us to answer. Now we'll turn it over to Steve and Pete.
Thanks, Marguerite, and thanks everyone for joining us today on the webinar. Hi, I'm Steve Gunderson. I'm a principal here at TDS, and after working here for more than 15 years, I've heard our migration teams refer to migration projects on a number of occasions like it's a chain link process. And I guess it makes sense. I mean, each phase that they work on is dependent on all the other work that's done in the process. So, it probably goes without saying that the first link, if you were looking at this in a chain link system, first link would be the discovery phase. And, our teams, during the discovery process, they follow a specific steps where first they'll start out and capture all the available data that they can gather. Typically, we're collecting from 6 to 10 or more data sets within a client's environment. And then, once they have that, they've got to validate the information, make sure it's accurate. And then they work, diligently to mitigate any conflicts that they find in the different data sets, any discrepancies. And then you obviously have to fill in any gaps that you might have before you can move on. But it's clearly a critical link as the discovery phase feeds into all of the final follow-on work, namely the next phase, which is migration strategies. When our teams develop a migration strategy, they understandably start out by first getting a good understanding of the current state. After they've done that, they also aggressively look to identify all the resources they have at their disposal. And they're looking at technical, financial, time, people, all the resources they have. And they also have to understand what constraints might limit their options and their strategies based on what the client's environment is and where they're going. So after they've done that, then they're in a position where they can develop that future state design, and they can define the migration methods that are specific to those designs that the customer has developed with them. So after they've completed the strategy, they now have basically guiding policies that help frame the next phase, which is analysis and planning. And it's in this phase where our teams will complete the more tactical planning activities, like creating migration groups or bundles, as they call it, developing test plans and scripts to use during the execution. And as important, they create the execution run books. Those are the step-by-step tasks, and everyone is following through the whole execution. All those things are developed during the analysis and planning. And part of this process, the teams are balancing the trade-offs. You're trying to optimize all the activities that they'll be doing during the next phase, which is the execution. Now, this is a fourth link, and this is where our teams will complete tabletop exercises with customers to do a practice run. They also will run a pilot migration or a test migration so that the teams can get their rhythm and their roles down and basically sort of warm up for the main event, if you will. And then if the clients are doing multiple migration events, it's very, very helpful to follow every single event with a lessons learned. It's amazing just how much people improve their performance from what they've learned and their experience they gained on those events. So anyway, this is an area that people are very familiar with. They think of a migration, they think of execution first. So back to the idea of the chain link process. I think everybody remembers that the phrase, when they were growing up, that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And I also think most people inherently understand that if you try to reinforce the strongest link in the chain, you're not going to strengthen the chain at all. So we've covered, I think, the 4 standard phases or links in the migration chain, if you will. But those links, they basically have been hardened. I know our teams have gone through so many migration projects, and they go through a regular process improvement and methodology evaluation to really harden all of those activities. So those really are the stronger links in the chain. So if those aren't the weakest links, then what does our team think is the weakest link in the chain? Well, our teams think that really the weakest link has crept in because of the advent of new technologies. Companies use a combination of tools for discovery. They use, like, for example, in discovery, they use CMDB or auto discovery. And then, like, for automated virtual migrations, there's a variety of transport tools. And, all these tools help with automation. They do add value and help speed the process. But the biggest weakness our teams have seen are those manual processes that they have to do before they can initiate a migration with one of those transport tools. Now, our teams absolutely love using transport tools, and they're a fantastic option, especially for larger projects, because, you just think about being able to automate a lot of those virtual migration activities. But every one of those tools requires somebody to input 25 or 30 manual data entry steps or their target specs for the new virtual machine. But all in all, you're inputting manual work into an automated tool. And so it's really not the tool that's the weakness. It's the manual work that our teams have had to do before they use these tools. And they're moving very large customers with big environments. And if you think about if you have an environment with 100 OS images, 100 virtual machines that you want to move, and you can eliminate 2,500 manual entries and the mistakes that might happen in doing that manual work, I think that's a win in anybody's book. In fact, Pete, why don't you walk us through how TDS has used Transition Manager to eliminate those manual steps and automate the manual steps and integrate with those transport tools? I think that would be a good step for us to go into next. Let me go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing you're pointing out, Steve, is, any execution, any event that you're going to get through necessitates preparation, right? We all know that. And part of the excitement about all of these automated tools is that, that execution come event day can be very quick, right? But the preparation leading up to that needs to be timely as well, because as we all know, if it takes you a month to plan something, that plan is then a month old. A lot of what our methodology along with our tool allows us to do is streamline a lot of the manual processes that lead into quick execution and the quick use of the automation in order to, streamline those manual tasks and really get the benefit that is touted by those tools, especially nowadays when businesses are using multiple tools at the same time. It's really helpful to be able to streamline not just one tool, but all of them in sync. Transition Manager's ingestion capabilities allow us to visualize your environment quickly and hone in on important assets like the one we see here, this server. And this server and all of the records we see here have individual records that track specific data about them. So on this server, we see many pieces of information. We call each of these different pieces of metadata fields, and they represent the aggregation of various sources of data. The colors of the fields are customizable and help users to organize specific metadata for whatever the project needs are, okay? This specific server we notice in the pink field here is marked for HCX in its upcoming migration. So the data captured in this record highlighted in green will be appropriately passed to the HCX tool automatically during configuration. So instead of planning out each and every data point that needs to be passed to these tools, we plan it out once and apply that plan to any tool, or I should say any server that necessitates a certain tool. So the specific steps that are needed are determined by a technical team, and an appropriate runbook is dynamically generated based on the metadata we've collected and the consistency we've kept throughout the data we've collected. And the instructions for generating the runbook are written into Transition Manager so that plans can be generated flexibly and easily iterated over different groups of infrastructure. And the result, as we see here, is a large runbook. Now, the tasks appear in various places. Here we see the tasks for this specific server on the server record we saw earlier. And once the associated application is ready for migration, its underlying servers, and this is one of the underlying servers for an application, will begin its journey, and in this case, the HCX journey. And each step, whether a human checkpoint or automatically invoked integration, is set off at the appropriate time, and all the while it's being tracked consistently and automatically in multiple views within Transition Manager. And each of these different reporting views is designed for a different stakeholder group. Now, during these move events, as we set them up, the teams have complete control over which tasks are human invoked, automatically invoked, or simple milestone checkpoints, which allow us to easily align business goals and technical needs. At scale, this leveraging of normalized metadata for the various sources streamlines the organization of appropriately sequenced tasks for hundreds or thousands of workloads at one time, orchestrating both human IT resources and integrations with your entire tool chain. As the runbook we see here is worked through, you can see specific sequences for certain tools are highlighted in red. And on the right side, we see the various tools demonstrated in this runbook. So acting as a single source of truth for all of your data, Transition Manager allows project teams to strengthen the weakest migration link, making data quickly and accurately actionable while orchestrating migration of workloads in record time.
So, what I like is when you see that demonstration right there, you can imagine more clearly the impact of executing a migration 10 times faster. And to me, another way to look at it is by automating all those steps, you're maximizing the investments you make in those tools like Carbonite or HCX or others. So Marguerite, I think that pretty much wraps things up on our end. Did you get any questions while we were talking?
Just a reminder, be sure to type your questions into the chat box in your control panel, and it does look like we have a couple here. One of the questions that came up earlier is there one transport tool any better than others?
Oh, I've heard this before. I'll take that one, Pete. When these tools are used correctly, they all improve the migration of your virtual systems. And I know our consultants help advise clients on selecting the tools based on things like the client's environment or the migration methods that they're using. But ultimately, our team is agnostic to those transport tools because Transition Manager integrates with them all. So it's more of a function of the client requirements, defining which tools are best for them.
Okay. And the next question is, how can this tool handle last-minute changes in an event?
Ooh, I'll take that one, Steve. So
Okay.
the nice thing about Transition Manager and in our methodology around that is you know, it's really a building process, building up this chain that we've spoken to throughout today's webinar. And as we build that chain, we go through certain steps to gather the data, validate the data, make plans with the data, and then solidify those plans so that we can execute in a streamlined fashion. However, life always happens and things need to sometimes be changed. So the nice thing is that through this step-by-step process, if we realize we can't migrate a server or we have a network outage and one part of our eventual, or I should say our planned wave is inhibited from making its move, we can easily and quickly adapt to that by simply going back to our prearranged groups, eliminating things that need to be eliminated, and then again, all these different steps are based on the data we've gathered from the beginning. So because we've gathered that data, we click a button and dynamically we're tapping into that metadata to recreate our plans at that point, excluding servers that we needed to get rid of or including more servers that maybe we needed to reprioritize. So again, our ability to flexibly switch certain pieces of that metadata in bulk or individually allows us to rearrange, and then again, we click another button and we recreate our entire runbook, and it all does it appropriately based on the data.
Okay, great. And then the next question I'm getting is, I'm not sure I understand how this data is brought into Transition Manager. Can you clarify, please?
Oh yeah, I'll take that one as well. So part of what we're talking about today, of course, is the weakest link being the human manual processes that kind of inhibit the acceleration that these automation tools are supposed to give us. And, you know, case in point, there's lots of discovery tools that really scan our environment and give us quick amounts of data, and that's great. But how do we quickly transform that data from one place and get it into Transition Manager? Not only that, how do we take data, as Steve said, from multiple sources, because many businesses have different data sources, and aggregate it in a normalized way? And we do that with what we call an ETL script. Okay, so ETL is extract, transform, load. And these scripts allow us to say, if we're getting data from this source, this is exactly what I want to do to that data. Okay, I want to grab these 10 fields. I want to normalize them in this way so that they match up with data from a different source. So we set up these ETL scripts so that, again, we have one-click access to data refreshes from those various tools. And it can be for that initial ingestion. The first time we do it takes a little bit longer because we have to do the prep work to figure out what information is important to us. We click that button, we get the initial load, and then from there, anytime we get data refreshes, we click the one button again, run the fresh data against our script and get it into Transition Manager, keeping data updated and maintained really throughout the project. You know, there's never a time when you can say, I have a great snapshot of the data, and by the time you say that, something may have changed, right? So this ETL engine allows us to constantly refresh our data with accuracy and consistency, again, eliminating the manual need to potentially miss copying and pasting something or the like.
Okay. And the next one is, what are the practical limitations to the size of an event?
Oh, I think I can answer this. We just had a large event last week that I can reference. So as you might expect, event planning, bundling, and the sizing of an event are determined again by the tools and the migration methods that each client may choose to use. But the events are also impacted by the complexity of the infrastructure and criticality of the apps and things like that. So, I guess the answer is it depends. But I know TDS just completed a 600 workload event for a large financial client 2 weeks ago, thanks in large part to utilizing that automation with Transition Manager. But the sizes can vary significantly. And as part of our work, our consultants help clients weigh all the technical and business factors and then develop those migration events and bundles around those factors. So, I mean, it can be very large, and it can be as small as 25. So it could range dramatically. So, hope that answered the question.
And what happens if there's a problem with the target environment during a migration?
Oh yeah,
I'll let you handle that one.
yeah, sure. That's a good one. So similar to making last minute changes, that flexibility we have to tweak our data and then kind of reinitiate the setup of automated tasks and human tasks. If we have a problem live during a migration, we're not going to, reorganize our groups in the middle of a migration, but we do want to, in some way, flag the problematic server, right? And we want to get to the bottom of it as soon as we can. And the nice thing is, similar to most run books, but different in that we can kind of focus on the sequencing that's available in our run book, right? So we've laid out the entire plan. All the human tasks, all of the automated tasks are lined up in a sequence based on our plan. Because we can generate those run books so quickly, we have the ability to practice that plan, vet that plan. So then come event day, if we do see a problem, all we have to do is flag that one hiccup in our run book, that one task that says shut down the server, and we're having trouble shutting that server down. You flag that task as on hold, and then any subsequent tasks that are in some way connected at all based on our plan will simply never become in the ready state, meaning they are ready to be worked on. So just clicking that one button, putting that on hold, which is something you have to do manually, necessarily tells the team that this is on hold and will make sure nothing that is connected to that task occurs. So we kind of have that risk aversion in place simply by creating a well-sequenced group of tasks. You put that on hold, and then anybody who's expecting a task will potentially have a question, where's my task? I'm supposed to be shutting down the underlying database. What's going on? And it forces conversation and you get to the bottom of the problem, or you end up saying, you know what, we need to save this server for the next wave, right? So again, one click allows us to make sure no further problems occur. And then our team can focus again on the project progress. So working on the things that can be worked on and then getting to the bottom of the problem, whatever it may be.
Okay, great. And last question, how does Transition Manager interact with these tools?
That is, that's a big question for sure. And I've already answered it slightly with the ETL engine. I'll add some more color to that. And obviously there's a lot to it. These tools do different things. They do different things in different ways. Some of them are network tools. Some of them are server tools, discovery tools at the front end, migration tools at the back end. So let's kind of break it down into two things that Transition Manager does. The one I already talked about, the ETL engine, our ability to kind of manipulate data that is outside of Transition Manager so that it can go into Transition Manager fluidly and in an organized fashion. We can also use that ETL engine in Transition Manager to make bulk updates at appropriate times. And more on that when I get to the next thing, which is API integration, right? We all know what APIs are. You call out to a different application and you're able to communicate with it and tell it to do things and then get responses from it, etc. Within Transition Manager, we have called an action. And we define these actions with a variety of ETL scripts that allow us to manipulate data, API actions, which we're all familiar with and allow apps to talk to other apps and kind of set things in motion. And then again, we would use an ETL script. So initially, we're using ETL scripts at the front end to get data into the tool. And we could be in the external tool, gathering that data export, then we take the raw file, click a button in Transition Manager to initiate the ETL script, right? That's level one. We can also send an API call from Transition Manager to fetch the data. And then once that data is fetched, we run it through the ETL script. So we could have one click to do that whole ingestion process. That's typically what we set up for periodic data refreshes, maybe weekly or monthly, we'll get a refresh from different tools. And that's one click refresh of our data. On the back end, things get a little bit more complicated potentially, but we're still using the same building blocks. So we have, on the back end, we probably start with an API action. So call out to a server to install an agent for a certain migration tool. Then we, confirm that installation. We get the migration happening. We do the final cutover, and then we use another API call to gather data from that, run that data through an ETL script, an engine, to make data updates. So all that being said, we have basic building blocks that are totally customizable to allow us to gather data, use that data effectively, pass that data to tools appropriately, and then gather the new data after transformations have occurred and put it back into Transition Manager. And we're just using a few building blocks there. We set them up in Transition Manager. They're all referencing the organization that's customizable within Transition Manager so that we have the data we need, the way we want it, the way we need it, and it's, again, actionable for any purpose it needs to be, whether we're doing migrations, data updates, data refreshes, upgrades to servers. So again, these building blocks are kind of how Transition Manager utilizes that data, refreshes that data, and speaks with tools. So essentially, it's API actions and the ETL script engine.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Steve. It looks like we've answered all our questions. To learn more about how to accelerate your data center migrations and consolidations, you can visit www.tdsi.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn under Transitional Data Services-TDS. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.